adore The Legend of Zelda, and with the release of Tears of the Kingdom fast approaching, or perhaps you're from the future and lucky enough to have already played it, there's still no better time to look back at our adventures with the hero named Link.
The Legend of Zelda is a series I hold very dear to me, so getting the opportunity to talk about the games, ranking them, giving my personal story with them, is a good idea for an early video on this channel, as hopefully it will help you guys get to know me more. But remember, this is a very personal ranking of the games, so you may not agree with me, but that's the beauty of it. Each one of these will resonate differently with people, so please, in the comments, let me know your favourite. Oh, and also, there will be light spoilers throughout the video.
Starting off where it all began, there's no better place to really, The Legend of Zelda on NES. Launching in 1986, and considering this was 13 years away from my birth, I couldn't really play it on release. Instead, opting to play it 32 years later on the Nintendo Switch, where it launched in the Nintendo Online service. I guess I was busy growing up.
Playing it on NSO meant I had access to save states and the rewind feature. Yes, I know these are forbidden words to most hardcore gamers, but honestly, for the young adults of today, where we've had our brains rotted away by the internet and TikTok, I think it really enhanced my experience with this game. The Legend of Zelda was also one of the first games to have a battery built into the cartridge, allowing players to save, so it only seems fitting to keep up with modern technology and use save states. Being built alongside Super Mario Bros, when Nintendo thought of gameplay ideas, they would choose which game the idea would be better suited to, and thus creating the building blocks for each series respectively. Playing the game now, you do get a wonderful sense of exploration, but you can really struggle to find your way. Entrances being hidden behind a bush that you have to set fire to can really leave you scratching your head for hours, so thankfully the overworld theme is just so iconic. I could listen to it all day, and at times I did, as you might have to spend all day searching for the next place to go. I have always found the overworld a bit unsettling, like a pretty bleak landscape after a brutal apocalypse. This isn't necessarily bad, I quite like the uneasy feeling, and it makes me feel like Hyrule really needs to be saved. It's just lacking the whimsical charm that most other Zelda games' overworlds give off. But once you finally get into one of the game's dungeons, this game truly shines. Each room giving you a challenge as you traverse a complex maze of a dungeon. The game is a showcase for that hardcore, retro difficulty. Without save states, I don't think I would have stuck through it. But with the use of modern technology, you have the freedom to choose how you wish to play the game. Although it seems pretty primitive by today's standards, it's always fun to look back at where it all began. If you know what you're doing, the game can be completed in about 8 hours. I played a little each night after work for a week, and treated it like a good bit of respite in between playing some modern AAA games. So I think the original The Legend of Zelda on the NES deserves C tier.
So, in fear of sounding like a big fat phony, game number 2, and it's already one I haven't played. But luckily, we've got Joe here, and it's his favourite game.
Hi, I'm Era.
All jokes aside, why is Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link one of the only Zelda games I haven't played? I think it's because it doesn't feel or look like a Zelda game. Our adventure immediately starts off in a 2D side-scrolling setting, and when you leave this area, you're in a big, Dragon Quest-like open world where monsters roam freely. Once you make contact, you are suddenly brought back into the 2D side-scrolling area. The game then feels more akin to a beat-em-up as you battle multiple enemies to get back to exploring. Possibly they thought they would have newfound success combining RPGs and platformers. The game didn't perform poorly, but thankfully what came next ignored the oddities of this game and cemented The Legend of Zelda as a true gaming icon.
The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Now, we're really getting to the good stuff. The gameplay, outstanding. The graphics, beautiful. The story, intriguing. Whoa, what just happened? Anyway, with this game releasing in 1991, it really made the Super Nintendo super.
With a solid base of what a Zelda entry should be, laid out by the previous 2 games, A Link to the Past takes what worked best and runs with it. The game has a much more lived-in world compared to the Hyrule found in the original. With shops, castles and homes dotted throughout, we are charmed by the people inhabiting this world, and the music is enhanced to the max. The graphics are timeless and detailed, making me nostalgic for a time I wasn't even alive. The game didn't really make Link or Zelda three-dimensional protagonists, and instead the story is more or less, unlikely hero saves the princess. But instead, this adventure fleshes out iconic elements of the world, like giving a deeper story behind what the Triforce is, as well as introducing players to the Master Sword. The first 3 dungeons of the game, leading up to earning the Master Sword for the first time in the series, really sets you up for feeling like you can take on the Dark World. Having these 2 large maps to explore must have blown people away back in 1991, and to this day I can't think of many games that use this idea. It's a great way to ramp up difficulty too, as the Dark World is far more brutal than the Light, as you'd expect. Some would say this game could be too difficult, but once you've played enough Zelda games, you kinda learn the language, so I didn't necessarily find this game all too difficult. We also get some of the first boss fights in the series I would genuinely call fun, like the Swamp Palace boss, using the hook shot to pull away smoke from the boss to reveal its weak spot. It's just a smart use of what becomes such an iconic weapon in Link's arsenal. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past deserves an A rank, expanding upon the lore of the franchise and making a truly enjoyable adventure game whilst doing so.
The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening is a full Zelda experience on a handheld, and it released back in 1993, so it truly deserved the Switch remake where it could showcase a beautiful toy-like aesthetic. This game never fails to bring joy to my day when I play.
I must admit that I never completed Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. Instead, I held off until it graced the Switch. I'm spoiled in this modern era and can find it challenging to go back to play games on my Game Boy Color. At first, I was skeptical about the remake's art style, but then I came to terms with the fact that the Zelda franchise is always switching up the style, which is one of the reasons that makes it so great. Despite these luscious graphics having a nasty effect on the Switch's hardware and causing the occasional FPS drop, it didn't take me long to fall in love with it, and the wonderful sound effects just melt my heart. The Link's Awakening amiibo is definitely one of the favourites in my collection. The game itself strips away any connection to Zelda, Ganon and even Hyrule, making it quite an isolated adventure, at least from who you'd expect to see. You do see some quite familiar yet estranged faces showing up to play quite a vital role. The remake, coming 2 years after Breath of the Wild, didn't do it all too many favours, as it highlighted just how clunky the game can be, not just in controls but also in way of exploration. Vague clues guide you rather than your own need for investigation. The dungeons aren't all that inspired either, making you question if you even want them back after Breath of the Wild took them away. If you look past the clunky experience and realise you're playing a game that fit onto the Game Boy back in 1993, you'll realise just how amazing the game is. I can assure you that you'll be in store for a fantastic time on Koholint Island. The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening deserves a B tier, albeit a clunky game, but charming and quirky nonetheless, giving us something new after we've already saved the princess 3 times prior.
The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This is the closest thing I could have found to the Temple of Time, the most iconic locations and the most iconic of Zelda games. It was a groundbreaking step forward, not just for Zelda, but for 3D gaming in general, pushing the boundaries of what could have been done in a 3D world.
The fact that both Mario and Zelda were able to transition into 3D so seamlessly on their first attempt is an amazing testament to the game designers at Nintendo. When I got my shiny metallic red 3DS alongside this game, I don't want to sound dramatic, but it was quite the life-changing moment. Everything in this game just works so well, they have thought of it all, just like the Z targeting to fight enemies. Having this large and immersive open world to explore at your own pace is quite the feat. Though Hyrule Field can feel vast and intimidating at times, just find yourself a Epona and you'll have an absolute blast galloping across the land. Actually giving Zelda a more prominent role is wonderful. Gone is the damsel in distress, and here we have the heroic badass princess. The story, seeing you transform from boy to man, is intriguing. Much like before when we earned the Master Sword and gained newfound power in A Link to the Past, this game levels up that feeling by turning you into a stronger version of yourself. I always feel so cool and unstoppable after leaving the Temple of Time as adult Link with the Master Sword in hand and then seeing what's to come to Hyrule if you fail the mission. There's no better motivator. Thinking of something negative to say is so hard with this game, and I don't think that's a detriment to my writing, as countless amounts of people would say this is by far the greatest game, not just in the Zelda franchise, but of all time. Yeah, I suppose I could dog on the water temple, but honestly, I didn't even find it that bad. Maybe that's because I had so much prior warning that when I got to the temple, I made sure I had a lot of time on hand, and knew to be pretty smart about the whole ordeal. And yeah, I actually enjoyed the water temple. Did you guess? Of course, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time gets an S rank.
The immense success of Ocarina of Time prompted Nintendo to swiftly create one of the most distinct and unsettling entries in the Zelda franchise. Despite having fewer dungeons than the average Zelda game, it somehow still manages to leave a more profound effect on players, exploring the haunting themes of death in a truly unforgettable way.
Taking place in the timeline where the Sacred Realm is saved, in what's called the Child Era, we start with Link just chilling until he dies? Well, not quite, it's a bit ambiguous, but after Link wakes up, we find ourselves in the land of Termina, where you won't believe this, but all the inhabitants are about to be destroyed by a giant moon that's going to crush into their homes. This story is bonkers. The game uses many of the same assets as Ocarina of Time, but remixes them, so this very outlandish story is needed for the game, as it makes it feel ever so unique, while still fundamentally borrowing quite a lot from Ocarina of Time. Even though so much is borrowed, there's still time for fresh new gameplay. Masks play a vital part, giving you the opportunity to transform into different species found across Hyrule. Swim at high speeds with a Zora mask, or roll around as a Goron. There's lots of variety to be had in this game, but the most distinct gameplay mechanic is time, or lack of. Constantly you are reminded of your impending doom, only having 3 in-game days until Termina is destroyed. Thankfully you can play a little tune, causing you to warp through time back to the start of the 3 days, with each loop hopefully gaining more necessary items to progress through the game. This time mechanic adds so much stress. In my first playthrough I took too much time in one of the dungeons, meaning I had a very minimal amount of time for the boss fight, an extra level of tension as I had to defeat the boss before time ran out. I did fail a fair bit. The game does let me down personally, as there are only 4 dungeons, and these areas are often where I have most of my fun, but thankfully the game redeems itself with an overworld filled to the brim with side quests and collectibles. Majora's Mask deserves an A rank. The game isn't as groundbreaking as Ocarina of Time, but remixes what was great and brought us to a new world where a story unfolds that you won't be forgetting anytime soon.
The Oracle games, why haven't they remade them on Switch yet, in the art style of the Link's Awakening remake? It would give me a reason to play them, because I'm sure they're great, I just haven't given them a chance yet.
These games are connected to one another. It doesn't matter what order you play them in, but the only way to see the true ending is to complete both. It's a pretty nifty concept for getting you to buy 2 games. I think Nintendo could definitely bring out a remake, combining the 2 and charging full price for it. Surely nobody would complain at that. So yeah, the Oracle games are going to have to go in never played. Hopefully one day I'll change that.
When Wind Waker was first announced for the GameCube, many fans were upset with the game's cartoony art style, but oh boy were they wrong. The game's shell-shaded art style has withstood the test of time. Yeah, that was a pretty good take, we'll go with that.
That was really good.
Wait, there's an iPhone down here. No way. Okay, I've got it.
Yeah, anyway, back on track. Just how joyous is the style of this game? The storyline follows Ganondorf's defeat as he gets sealed away in the adult timeline following the events of Ocarina of Time. Hyrule is submerged underwater, setting the stage for an exciting adventure on the high seas. That clever utilisation of the GameCube's limitations getting worked into the story. Obviously, the game needs to be bigger than the prior two on the N64, and so you could call it a cheat having such spaced out land to explore. Thankfully, the sea in between the land is a pleasure to traverse with your trusted companion, the King of Red Lions. I do feel like this game is slightly style over substance. The core gimmick of the game, controlling the wind, I personally don't feel is all that inspired. The beauty of the game comes from the setting and the art style, more than the actual gameplay. Yes, even though I enjoy sailing, is it all too different from riding on Epona? Aside from having to stop every now and then to change the course of the wind. Unfortunately, the game doesn't quite nail the dungeons either. You very rarely see a dungeon from this game appear in anyone's top 10s, aside from the Tower of the Gods. We even have one of the most annoying late stage fetch quests, where you have to find the fractured Triforce. The game is an epitome of Sunday morning cartoons. It looks wonderful, and it is charming on a surface layer, but strip away this, and you reveal one of the least compelling 3D entries, as it focuses more on rehashing the old than giving us the new, when we talk about anything aside from the art style and world. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker gets a B tier. The world is still fun to explore, and it is just so charming, but from a gameplay point, I think I'd rather replay one of the others.
Whoa, The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap bringing a small Link to a small screen. Right, now how do I get down?
Surprisingly, Nintendo let Capcom take the reins with this one, and they really did themselves proud, with such a charming adventure, it's probably one of the most overlooked entries. I loved my Game Boy Advance when I was a kid, so I'm gutted I never had this game. Instead, in 2004, all I wanted to play was shoddy licensed games. Thankfully, my tastes evolved, and I played this for the first time around 2014 when I had a bit of cash to burn on my Wii U eShop account, with a lovely opening to the game where Zelda wins a shield for Link at a special celebration, all before dramatically she gets turned into stone. So there's the setup for the story. Link has to save the princess one more time. The game fleshes out the lore of the world by bringing in a new race to Hyrule, the Minish, a group of super microscopic gnome-like people who are responsible for a lot that goes on in the world. As Link, we get to shrink down and see the world from their size, seeing a whole different perspective, adding in an extra layer to the possibility of puzzles found throughout the world. Additionally, getting to see the same locations but in a completely different way, like the town of Hyrule. It's so fun to pop into all the little nooks and crannies when you're the size of a Minish. But the most interesting way the shrinking mechanic is used is for some boss fights, most notably against Mazala. Looking like a typical Zelda boss, you must take him on in your normal size and then shrink down, run inside him and destroy part of him from there. Really fun stuff. The Minish Cap is a familiar feeling top-down Zelda game, but it spices things up enough to make itself quite the memorable little adventure. The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap, gets an A tier. Handheld Zelda games really do slap, and this game has never looked better than on an OLED Switch screen. I highly recommend it.
The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, giving people what they wanted after the cartoony art style of Wind Waker. This is the most edgy Zelda to date, and I think it's fantastic. Playing this in HD on the Wii U is a dream, and with no silly wiggle-waggle Wii Remote physics, this is the most realised, traditional Zelda to date.
Another game that passed me by on release, both on the Wii and then when the HD remaster came out on the Wii U, I still didn't pick it up. I really don't know why I didn't get it on the Wii U. I literally got everything else on that darn console. A craving had always been there to want to play this game. Just recently, in 2021, I bought a Wii U again, pretty much for the sole purpose of playing this game, and Nintendo Land. I just love how playing it on the Wii U feels, having full camera movement with everything just linked to buttons and not having to wave my arms around. It controls so nicely, and say what you will about the gamepad, but that second screen being used for map and item management, it's just ideal. The game feels like a culmination of everything that has come before, yet still bringing an interesting and dynamic gimmick. This being the transformation into Wolf Link. It's surprising how fun he is to control in this form. I have always felt like this is an older brother to Ocarina of Time, and somewhat a bit of a distant retelling, as it still focuses on all the classics, getting the Master Sword, saving the princess, and defeating Ganon. Although Ganon does take a slight backseat as the villain in this game. Hyrule is vast and the climate is varied. We will travel to dried up deserts and scale snow-covered mountains. All these have an unsettling aura about them, almost like they're all haunted, especially when we enter the Twilight Realm, a dark reflection of the world. At certain points we enter here and feel all the more helpless, as we can only inhabit it as Wolf Link for most of the game. Thankfully, back in the Light World, our trusty steed Epona is back, and more vital than ever in helping us explore the overworld, and even a companion in battles as we can now fight on horseback. These are some of the most intense moments in the whole series. Though I do love the world, I do think the character design for a lot of the NPCs is a bit too much. You get where I'm coming from? Mate, tuck your shirt in. I haven't spoken all too much about items in this video, but I think Twilight Princess takes the crown for the most varied and yet classic collections of items. Staples like the bow and the boomerang show up. We even get to see updates to old items too, the hook shot becoming the claw shot, and then even get an upgrade in the game to become the double claw shot. But also, we get absolutely creatively bananas items like the spinner. It's a vital item for one of the best boss fights in the whole series against Star-Lord, grinding from rail to rail like Link's a skater. It's really fantastic. Yeah, it's up there with the greats at an S rank. Some people might not be too fast to agree with me, but I've certainly had some of my best Zelda experiences with this game.
The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. When I said handheld Zelda games slapped, I must have forgotten about the DS games. With this one being the first I ever played, it's a surprise I ever returned to the series. Oh, awkward time to catch me. Anyway, there's probably no better time than now to talk about the Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. I've picked up this game so many times, but I've never had the determination to complete it.
I'm going to talk about both the DS games here, as I haven't got all too much to say about them individually, and it's pretty obvious I'm not a fan. Both of these games are sat waiting for me to play on my Wii U. Hopefully one day I will finish them and retroactively give them a higher ranking. But remember, this is my personal tier list, and for me, personally, I just have a mental block with these games. especially Phantom Hourglass. I just remember being sat in the car on long journeys whilst my parents drove, playing one of these games on my DS, and I used to get such terrible car sickness when playing games. I was young and dumb, the choice was car sickness or boredom, and I went with the immediate gratification to stop the boredom, but then pay the price with feeling pretty queasy later on. I can now not separate this feeling from Link's DS outings. I have these games at my very fingertips waiting for me to play, but with a back catalogue of games as far as the eye can see, and so little time to play, I need a really big motivator to sit down with these. I'm sorry, but these games genuinely make me feel sick. It's gonna have to be an F tier.
Skyward Sword. Much like this view, the game is beautiful. Though unfortunately, it was released on the Wii during the dark ages of the franchise, where gimmicks ruled. But thankfully, Nintendo re-released the game in HD on the Switch in 2021, where I could sit down on my sofa and play it with my Pro Controller.
Motion controls are so annoying, because something as intuitive as just pressing the A button turns into a whole faff. I dropped off this game when playing it on the Wii because of the motion controls, and never was all too keen on revisiting it. It's often touted as being the worst 3D Zelda game. The concept and art style of this game always intrigued me though. Getting to see the start of the timeline and the very first incarnation of Zelda and Link, it's really quite a novel idea and setting for the game. Along with the opportunity of riding through the sky with your Loftwing, on paper, this adventure sounds like a classic. I was always under the impression that motion controls were stopping us from living out this wonderful Zelda adventure. For years, AGI Onuma laughed at the idea of playing this game without motion, but just our luck. They went and gave us a remake anyway. 2021 we saw the HD remaster of this game, and I was determined to beat it this time. Playing with a Pro Controller means that all motion movements are tied to the left thumbstick, and to move the camera, you've got to hold down the L button. This is far from ideal, and takes so long to get accustomed to, and unfortunately, too long for me. Yet again, I put down Skyward Sword. It's not just the motion controls that hold back this game. Quite fittingly, as it's first in the timeline, the game also feels a lot like Baby's first Zelda. Being unbelievably handholdy and linear, the broken up world feels more like you're going through a level of Mario Galaxy than exploring a vast Hyrule. I left the game for, let's say, 6 months, possibly even longer, but in the end, I decided to give it another shot, and somehow this game managed to perform a full 180 on my opinion. The strange, motionless motion controls just clicked with me, and I was locked into this beautiful world. The linear nature of the game no longer frustrated me, and instead, I quite enjoyed taking it for what it is. The large amount of backtracking in the game did end up grinding my gears, but by this time, I was far too invested in the story to give up. I think I ended up coming to really enjoy this game because it strips back a lot of the fat that makes a Zelda game, and leaves you with some truly great dungeons. I've said before how much I love the dungeons in these games, and thankfully, they are top notch here. The standout, of course, being the Sky Keep, bringing everything we've learned throughout the game, culminating into one dungeon that also bolsters the unique gimmick of having us actually rearrange and change the dungeon whilst in it. It makes up for all the backtracking throughout the game. And also, how could I not mention how much I really enjoyed the Imprisoned? Hearing a lot of negative chatter about this boss, I wasn't all too looking forward to having to go up against him multiple times throughout the game. But it's pretty cool. Each time the boss fight changes just a little to keep you on your toes, and having to stop him before reaching the temple, it's pretty frantic. And the fact that it also enables a strong story arc for our boy Goose, hey, it's a pretty cool addition to the game. After much thought and consideration, I think Skyward Sword finds itself a B tier. We've had our ups and downs, but when I rolled credits on this game, I was happy with my experience.
A Link Between Worlds. This is my favourite 2D Zelda game, and I couldn't put my 3DS down when I was playing it. Drawing inspiration from the classic A Link to the Past, but also showing what's in store for the future of the franchise.
The 3DS is by far one of my favourite bits of technology I have ever owned, and it's a Zelda powerhouse. Being able to play many Zelda games thanks to remakes and the amazing Virtual Console, rest in peace. Though A Link Between Worlds is the only Zelda game the 3DS can truly call its own, so thankfully it's a near perfect entry for this amazing little device. I love the look and style of Link to the Past, but seeing the world in wonderful 3D is a treat. The style is nothing more than perfect for a top-down adventure. The game is not just rendered in 3D, but also playable in 3D, so it must have been some kind of joke of the developers to have Link spending a fair amount of the time in this game as 2D. The big gimmick we have here is Link can turn himself into a painting, sticking to a wall and traversing the side of buildings and landscapes. Also in our 2D form, we can warp through cracks in space and time to enter Lorule, the dark reflection of Hyrule. It's a fun gimmick and used to excellent effect in some of the game's puzzles. The dungeons are some of the best Nintendo have ever put out. Labyrinths full of real, satisfying head scratchers. They aren't the easiest, but not anything that's going to leave you puzzled for an age. Instead, the perfect level of satisfying. While the moment-to-moment gameplay is top-notch, other parts aren't too deep. Characters are a little underwhelming. Zelda is trapped in a painting, for pretty much the whole game, so we aren't getting any cool hero princess moments. The game does play a little too nostalgic in this regard. The familiar setting and rehashed storytelling lures old-time fans into a false sense of security, as the game shakes up the formula in one of the biggest ways the series had ever seen. Gone is the step-by-step process of following what order items had needed to be collected. Instead, the items can be rented or bought from a somewhat familiar face. This is a big game changer, as it means you can pretty much go anywhere and do anything right from the early hours of the game. Can you see why I said this game paves the way for the future? There's an interesting cap with this new mechanic too. You will no way be able to afford all the items from the get-go, so you still have to be smart about it. Renting the items is the cheaper option, but once you die, you lose that item, and will have to go back to get it from Ravio again, meaning you could be partway through a dungeon and become itemless. A cool way to add some tension. It's high up there, I know. A Link Between Worlds gets an S rank, the very pinnacle of 2D Zelda. Although, revisiting some of what we have seen before, the game isn't afraid to give us something new, a bridge to Breath of the Wild. Well, almost. We've just got one minor setback before we can get there.
The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes. Yeah, this game really hurt me. Expecting me to try and find 2 other people with a 3DS and wanting to play Zelda when I was age 16 and acting like I wasn't a massive Nintendo nerd? Yeah, impossible. I've never played this game and I don't think I ever will. Wait, you wanted to play Zelda when you were 16? Massive nerd.
Need I say more?
In 2017, Breath of the Wild revolutionised the gaming industry, and much like Link, Nintendo had awoken from their slumber. With its stunning open-world sandbox, this game propelled the Nintendo Switch to the forefront of the conversation, giving players an unprecedented gaming experience that breathed new life into the genre.
It's a masterpiece. You've seen all the 2-hour-plus videos of deep dives and retrospectives across YouTube. You've heard people not stop going on about this game for the past 6 years. I lose myself to this world every time I enter it. Each point throughout the game you feel like you're becoming stronger after every little task you do to build up your Link. It's a sense of progression where everything feels worthwhile, and I hardly get that in any other game, and you can take it all at your own pace. Of course, there's the complaints about the ludonarrative dissonance, where the gameplay doesn't reflect the setup to the story being told, as the story sees you in a rush to save Hyrule. Who cares about this? It's a video game, you should be able to do whatever you want. And guess what? You can even follow the narrative the story imposes on you. I've seen people complete this game in 30 minutes. That's just how free this whole experience is. I don't even agree with the fact that this is a bad Zelda game. We still have items to collect and dungeons to explore, just a lot more of them. The shrines are impeccable, hidden all over the map with a variety of challenges to be found in them. These creative puzzle rooms overload my brain with dopamine whenever I find a new one. The puzzles are a joy to work out, but the whole aesthetic of them too. The feeling when you're in one of them, it's an unparalleled experience. I also won't give anyone the time of day who complains about the weapon durability. Oh, your amazing Great Frost Blade just broke? Go and find a new one! The fact that the weapons break is why I never get bored of exploring the world, because I know there's always going to be something for me to find. I love the memories that can be found throughout the world. These cutscenes are blissful to watch, and seeing Zelda and Link spend time together melts my heart. No one person will share the same adventure here. Just the other day I posted a TikTok about my favourite location in the game, and I had loads of people replying with theirs. Nobody shared the same location. Different places resonate with different people for different reasons. Everyone has carved out their own path and their own story to tell. March 3rd, 2017, the day I didn't sleep. I worked the midnight selling the Switch to people who pre-ordered it along with Breath of the Wild. About 1:30 I got home and booted the game up for myself. 2:30 I tried to get some sleep. I did have college that day, but of course I couldn't sleep, so I just played more Zelda. Let's just say the lack of sleep made me feel pretty sick, and I couldn't make it into college at all that day. Looking at the bigger picture, this game kinda saved Nintendo too. The past few years before this game came out, Nintendo was struggling, like really struggling, but with this game coming out and getting people to notice the Switch, they have put themselves onto a solid winning streak. Yes, of course, this game gets an S rank. I was going to joke and start off by putting it in like A or B, but that just wouldn't be very funny, would it? It's so nice to be home. And what an insane project that was. Looking over and reviewing, ranking all the Zelda games. God, what a big feat, but I'm glad it's... Oh no, I forgot one. Link's crossbow training. How could I forget? You thought I was going to say Four Swords Adventures.
Hey, do you know what? This game's actually pretty good, and after playing all those Zelda games and having such great experiences, I'm feeling in a really good mood. So do you know, I'm just going to give it an S rank.
That's it, now we are actually done, and I cannot thank you enough for watching this video. It's been an absolute pleasure to make, and I hope you have really enjoyed it. I couldn't have done it without the help of my best friends, Jason, Joe and Ollie, as well as my dad, sister and beautiful girlfriend, who all helped me to film on location. If you could do anything, like, comment, subscribe, it would mean the absolute world to me. But let me know what you liked or didn't like about the video. I'd really like to improve my content. Thank you again so much for watching. I really hope you liked it.